Thank you so much for joining me for today's video broadcast. The title of today's broadcast is Frequency Healing. Can it really be this simple? And this is going to be a multi-part series. And I should add, what has been hidden is now eventually being revealed. One of my favorite quotes from Nikola Tesla: if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's what we're going to be doing in this video series. So Nikola Tesla, I mentioned in his famous quote. I just wanted to share this map with you of his map of multiplication. And in it, you can see the beautiful symbols that are within this map of composition and primes that he figured out in these mathematical calculations with the 2 and the 3 and the 4. And I particularly am drawn to the 3 and the 4 based on Dr. Golod's work, which came later after Nikola Tesla. So I wanted to share this with you and just kind of see what you can see in this beautiful drawing. And keep this in mind as we move forward. As the title of my broadcasts say, I think all of you know that I am very much into all of the different holistic healing modalities. For my own personal reasons, knowing a lot of people, it really just hurts my heart that they suffer from terminal illness, and children that suffer with cancer or other illnesses, and coming out of a pandemic, the fear and so forth that people have endured has really just hurt my heart, as many of all of you that I have spoken to. And in doing this series, I have always been fascinated with frequency energy and sacred geometry, and that's what I want to share with you in this broadcast. Several years ago, I was gifted with a copper pyramid, a 5-foot copper pyramid, which has fascinated me. I've gotten my own personal results, as well as bringing that pyramid to a all-staff meeting wellness day where I work during the day, and doing my own experiments without telling anybody what the pyramid does. I just invited them to step into it to give me their feedback. And to my surprise, not really, but they experienced a very wide range of feelings and emotions, but all of them were very, very positive. So I want to share some additional research that has been very well documented, but very little know about it, from a Russian scientist. First, I'm going to start with Dr. Alexander Golod. Dr. Golod was a Russian scientist who was tasked in the 1990s to study the effects of pyramid energy in both Russia and Ukraine. And some of his research was very, very fascinating. And what led me to delve deeper into Dr. Golod's work was one of his experiments that he did with inmates in Russian prisons. And the outcome was just mind-blowing for me. And hopefully you will get excited about it as well. Dr. Golod was quoted as saying, "In my opinion, the main problem in the study of pyramids is that many tend to see the results of the research elements of mysticism and shamanism. However, science with intuition already understand that here we are dealing with a new physics and a new biology." And here we have some Russian geometry pyramids, which are different than like the Giza pyramid The Russian pyramids that Dr. Gulag used are much taller and more narrow than the normal pyramid that we would consider or think about from Giza. And here these pyramids are still on display in Russia in parks. So they're very revered, and this science was, most of the pyramid and frequency energy science came from Russia and Ukraine. So we have a lot to thank Dr. Gulag for. So in one of his studies, Dr. Gulag did a study on the pyramid field and wanted to know if it dramatically and drastically improved prisoner behavior. And this is the study that really caught my attention when I had first heard about Dr. Gulag. And the study focus was to determine the effect of pyramid-treated table salt on the behavior of a population of over 6,000 prisoners. The experiment methodology used was over 5 tons of table salt was stored in a Russian geometry pyramid. The salt was then distributed and used for cooking and for table use by the nutrition services of the prisons within the Russian federal penitentiary system, housing over 6,000 prisoners. And I bet you're curious to know what the results are. These are very exciting. So the experiment results were the incidence of criminal behavior in the persons virtually disappeared within a few months, suggesting a corresponding increase in feelings of peacefulness and goodwill among the inmates within the facility. According to Dr. Gulag, after 6 months of using the table salt, the employees of these institutions spoke the same basic idea, that the prisoners were acting so much nicer that the people wondered if Dr. Gulag had somehow replaced the entire prison population of 6,000 or more. After 11 months, the following statistics were calculated. The death rate dropped by 3.5 times. Serious crimes reached 0, and the number of rule violations also decreased by 3 times. The one that got me was serious crimes reached 0. The experiment that led Dr. Gulag to study the mechanism of what had actually happened with the prisoners' subsequent tests, which I'll go into in a bit, showed reduction in aggressiveness in mice after drinking saltwater solutions exposed to pyramids, and demonstrated, in the words of Dr. Gulag, an acquired resistance to stress. That is amazing, given the amount of prison population that we currently have just in the United States alone. I mean, the implications of this therapy, if you will, or treatment really has unlimited potential by simply exposing common elements that would be ingested inside a pyramid. So in this study, the Russian geometry pyramid reduces stress in laboratory mice. So this goes along the study after the prison experiment. In the experiment methodology, studies were conducted on the effect of a group of mice of placing 1 gram, a tiny itty bitty bit, pieces of crystalline gypsum previously placed in the Russian pyramid next to the cell of the mice. So they didn't even ingest it, they just put the crystal of the gypsum next to where the mice were. The control group was not exposed to the crystals at all. After 5 days, the number of fights in the cells were counted using a microphone system and recording the number of fights that the mice would have, and the number of fights in the experimental group on average were 3.5 times lower. Again, we see that number than those in the control group. At the same time, the thymus cellularity in the mice were similar to those given above. Now, Dr. Golod goes on to say, we could conclude from these observations that an obvious decrease in the level of aggressiveness of the experimental group of animals was the result of exposure to the gypsum placed inside the pyramid. We know crystals, we know crystals have the ability to transmit energy. And for those of you who are not familiar with what gypsum looks like, gypsum is a soft silicone crystal, such as selenite, which it's very easy and very soft, and it's easy to break. And gypsum is also found, it's pulverized and made into sheetrock, which is how these Russian pyramids were made. They were made with PVC pipe and then covered with sheetrock, gypsum sheetrock. And that is the gypsum crystals that they used for this particular experiment. Dr. Golod further went on to do another experiment that the Russian pyramids promote heightened immunity. So this experiment methodology, the mice were kept in a pyramid in various numbers and from varying periods of time. For several days, the mice were infected with 4 increased doses of Salmonella typhimurium, a virus which results in symptoms similar to typhoid fever in mice. The control group was supplied with mice from the same strain and was contaminated with the same dose of culture, but without exposure to the pyramid field. The result findings, the survival rate of the mice who received exposure to the pyramid field considerably exceeded those in the control group. At smaller doses of contamination, 60% of the mice exposed to the pyramid survived, versus 7% in the control group. At larger doses of contamination, 30% of the mice exposed to the pyramid field survive versus just 3% of those in the control group. So the experiment concluded that exposure of mice to the pyramid field, they weren't even in the pyramid, they were just exposed to the energy around the pyramid, essentially promoted a heightening of their resistance to subsequent and consequent contamination of salmonella. Therefore, it is possible to speak about a powerful immuno-enhancing influence of the pyramid itself and the energy field that it creates, which I will go into more in the second video. Another study done on the pyramids to increase the blood platelet count. So the purpose of the study was to study the effects of water exhibited in the pyramid on the blood platelet count of rabbits. And the experiment methodology was to find possible changes in blood coagulation system of rabbits ex vivio, meaning occurring outside an organism, when replacing normal drinking water with water exposed to in the pyramid were investigated. Studies were conducted for 14 days. blood from the rabbits was taken before the start of the consumption of the pyramid water, and as well as on day 7 and day 14, after the start of the experiment. The experiment findings were the number of platelets of the rabbits before the introduction of pyramidal water was taken as 100%. On the 7th day after the start of the experiment, their numbers increased by 129%, and on the 14th day, they increased to 167%. It's also interesting to note that Russian pyramids were placed on the roof of hospitals for faster healing. In 1998, an 11-meter high, which is a little over 36 feet tall, pyramid was built on the roof of the Toladi City Hospital, and Dr. Golod and his staff, and this pyramid is very popular and still there today. And in the opinion of the hospital doctors, it helps very effectively in the treatment process. Now, why would they be concerned about blood platelet and blood coagulation? If individuals are having surgery and they tend to have a slow blood clotting recovery or slow to clot, they may bleed out. So this is a very, very interesting study, and in my personal opinion, the world according to Sunlion really deserves more studies in the benefits and therapeutic properties of this. And hopefully we will see more of this information coming out in the future. So pyramids reduce cancer and infectious disease. Since the end of 1997, circular contour pieces of granite and crystal that had been exposed in the pyramid began to be laid out around Moscow and the Moscow region. By the beginning of 1999, for about 40 such rings were laid out. And each ring contained approximately 50 to 300 stones with a total weight of approximately 20 to 200 kilograms, which is approximately 40 to 440 pounds. And the results were the number of reported cases of cancer, infectious diseases, and etc. decreased. So basically what they did is they took all of the stones that had been inside the pyramid, and then they went all over Moscow and in the Moscow region, and they laid them out in the forms of a circle, which is also a sacred geometry shape. So then it goes on to further, another study that Dr. Golod did was that the pyramids improved the lymphocyte proliferation and longevity. So the goal of this particular study that he did was to determine whether exposure to the Russian pyramid field had impacts on the lymphocytes, which are the small group of white blood cells, which help fight and boost our immune system. So the experiment methodology was that a study of the effects of the pyramid field on the human lymphoblast cells in the experiment group. Water placed inside the pyramid was used to prepare a solution of the nutrient growth medium, whereas in a control group, water that had not been exposed to the pyramid was used. Cell visibility was determined by staining cells with 0.4% Taipan blue and MTT. and was analyzed using a spectrometer for the absorption of the dye. The experiment results: by day 10, a noticeable increase in the number of cells and the percentage of cell visibility in the treatment exposed compared to the control group was observed. On day 11, these values were respectively 1.2 million total cells and 52%, that's 622,000, viability for the control, and 1.4 million, with an M, total cells per milliliter, and 88%, which is 1,232,000 viability for the experiment. On day 21, these values were 0.05 million total cells per milliliter and 2%, which is 1,000, viability for the control, and 0.3 million total cells per milliliter and 49%, which is 147,000, viability for the experiment in the experimental group. So showing that the cells that had been exposed to and developed in the pyramid water had far greater viability, proliferation, and longevity. That says a lot for those who may need to have a little boost in their lymphocytes and their white blood cell count. Well, what about the antiviral activity? Can it help with, the Rona or the flu or some other horrible diseases? Well, Dr. Golod looked into that as well. The antiviral activity of the drug venoglobulin was determined by its capability to protect mice cells from cytopathic, which is cell-destroying impact of the encephalomyocarditis virus, or EMC for short. Venoglobulin was diluted in distilled water up to the concentration of 50 milligrams per liter, and the drug was tested in two concentrations, 50 and 0.5 micrograms per milliliter. Then a portion of the solution was housed in the pyramid. Venoglobulin was deposited into cell-like cultures for 24 hours prior to their combination with the virus. And the results were: it was found that the venoglobulin in concentration of 50 micrograms per milliliter lowered the breeding capacity of the virus by approximately 300%. I'll say that again. It was found that the venoglobulin in concentration of 50 micrograms per milliliter lowered the breeding capacity of the virus by approximately 300%. The antiviral effect was still maintained at further dilution up to concentrations of 0.005 and additionally another 0.0005 micrograms per milliliter with consequent exposure to the pyramid. And the pyramid exposure reduced tumor growth as well. This again, I feel, is a very important study because of how many people have tumors and cancer and were exposed to carcinogens all the time. So in this experiment, in a series of experiments, mice were exposed to various carcinogens, and an experimental group drank water from the pyramid, whereby the control group just drank ordinary water. The outcome was the mice drinking the pyramid water had significantly fewer tumors develop than the mice drinking just ordinary water. And for my friend Bill, pyramids improve athletic endurance. Dr. Golod also did studies on the endurance factor, and the goal was to determine if an impact on endurance through exposure to the pyramids. Rabbits and white mice were exposed to the pyramid and then compared to a control group for endurance. The results were animals exposed to the pyramid gained 200% more endurance than control group animals, and their blood gained higher concentrations of leukocytes. Again, that's the white blood cells that help fight off infections and boost our immune system, and they showed a stronger immune system response. That is just fascinating. So I hope that you found some of these studies from Dr. Golod as fascinating as I have. This, in the first part of the series, I don't want to take up too much more time. I just wanted to introduce you to some of the studies, and then in part 2 of this series, I want to share with you how this pyramid energy works. So please join me for part 2, and please let me know what you think about this information in the comments below. I really would love to hear from you, and let me know what else you would like to know about as far as this frequency experiments are concerned. I know we have all been anxiously waiting for some of the Tesla medbed technology, and in doing research on this, a simple pyramid that you could set up, which I will go into in part 2, could it really be that simple? Well, according to Dr. Golod, yes, it can. So I want to thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you for your comments, and I look forward to seeing you in part 2. Take care, and God bless. Bye for now.